My name is Jürgen Scherl. I am the head of section for tactics at the National Defense Academy. And on the right side is Lieutenant Colonel Georg Stiedl, and he is the head of section for operations research, also at the National Defense Academy. What we did in the last year together was some research on Russia's warfighting doctrine. And our first initial intent was to better understand what happens in the Ukraine. It's not just pictures about drones or bullets and grenades. What drives their tactics? What makes their tactics in Ukraine work? And especially why Ukraine's counter-offensive struggled, especially in 2023. For this reason, we analyzed Russia's tactical doctrine to find out how formations organize and plan, especially a defensive operation. Our briefing will follow this agenda. Everything we say is very compressed, and more will come in the essay, or you can read our Truppendienst articles, which will go into more detail about Russian way of fighting. Before I come to Russia, I would like to start with some thoughts on maneuver warfare, how this one is connected to the offensive-defense balance, and what problems we face today. As we heard in the morning, the ideas of maneuver warfare are not new, they are old as warfare itself. Sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. But the important thing is, the concept at the end never died. It finally always made a strong comeback. So the key thing is, or our finding is, maneuver warfare became successful just in situations when its general ideas, which are very theoretical, were transferred to a specific plan. A plan, and that's important, that refers to a specific enemy. And each enemy has specific strengths and weaknesses. Let me give you a short historic example to support my statement. Let's go back to World War I. The battlefield changed here dramatically. With the machine gun and especially the most important weapon system, the new indirect fire artillery systems, the potential of firepower increased dramatically just in a few years. Both sides had more or less the same technology. But the thing is that these weapons could not be used equally on the offensive and on the defensive. Because at this time, machine guns and the artillery systems were heavy, and their mobility, especially when they are on the move, was very limited. So these systems helped the defender more than troops in the offense. For those on the offense, these new weapons just helped to prepare the attack. But in the attack, the infantry still had to move over open fields, unprotected. Artillery systems could not follow the infantry, and the communication and coordination between infantry and artillery, between fire and movement, was still very limited. So this meant that successful maneuvers ended in 1915 because of a lack of adaptation. Therefore, the existing offensive-defense balance was disrupted, and the defense became the stronger form of battle compared to the offense. We heard about this also in the morning. Armies planned and tried hard to restore the maneuver by adapting to the threats, but it took years. Finally, it was not one thing, but it was rather a package that was able to restart the maneuver. It was improved weapon systems in the area of firepower, mobility and protection. It was a new force structure, and it was new tactics. On the other side, fortifications were still the strengths of the defender, but it didn't guarantee success anymore, because mobility and mobile and protected formations became the dominant factor on the battlefield. So now, a century later, the situation in Ukraine mirrors the situation in World War I in some respect. The defense, especially in 2023, obviously became again the dominant form of warfare and of battle. So what can we learn from history? First of all, it's possible to restore maneuver warfare. Secondly, for this, you have to rethink your own tactics. Are they right? Are the battle orders right, and are the capabilities the right one to succeed? Thirdly, this takes a lot of time, but this is the most important thing, the problem always starts with the enemy. So the most important thing is to analyze and understand your opponent. Some older officers here know that. Officers back in the 80s took a great deal of time to analyze their opponent. They studied the Soviet tactics, and based on these outcomes, their own concepts were adapted accordingly. Today, we put too less effort, sometimes no effort, on analyzing our supposed enemy. So, how do our Russians plan to fight? Are the old concepts still working? Are they still valid? Did they change? We need answer to these questions, otherwise maneuver warfare will be absolutely dead. So what has to be done now? It's like in your tactics lessons when you were on your academies. The problem evaluation for military, this is the enemy evaluation, always comes first. So now let's have a closer look to the situation in Ukraine. As mentioned by Colonel Reisner, in the first stage of war in Ukraine, maneuver warfare was still possible, but the phase of battle changed immediately after months. And the reason is this one. This is Russia's Surovikin line, also known as Putin's Maginot line. With this defensive line, Russia finally stopped Ukraine's counteroffensive in late 2022, and it also prevented further losses of the occupied terrain in 2023. This line is not really a line, it's a defensive system, a belt. And along these lines, several Russian formations established their positional defense with up to 500,000 soldiers. And the line stretches from Belarus to the Black Sea in the south. And the way they fight seems for some of us old-fashioned, like in World War I, but it generally follows their actual doctrine. And there are more challenging elements in it than we often see. So let's now go a step further to the Russians' doctrine on defense. I agree to Colonel Reisner, Russia's current tactical doctrine is not new. They didn't start from scratch. Their battle tactics is an evolution of the Soviet doctrine, which was adopted to the 21st century. So the Russians still have their own unique way to fight, and this is definitely different to our way of fighting. In the last decade, before the war in Ukraine, Russian ground forces were oriented towards a strategic defense. So the ground forces were tasked to be prepared to stop an attack on Russian territory in the first, and then followed by a decisive counteroffensive to defeat the enemy. And everybody who knows about the Sabbat exercises can remember that in these large exercises, this scenario with defense and counterattack and counteroffensives was trained on a regular basis. So, although offensive and defensive operations are by doctrine equally important for the Russians, the defense is for them still seen as a means to an end. You cannot win campaigns by staying on a defense. The offense is the only way to defeat the enemy. So the defense is therefore just a temporary action that sets the stage for a follow-on offensive. And based on this mindset, a Russian formation conducts a defense either to deny an area to an enemy when it is vital, and the defense buys time for the preparation of a subsequent offensive operation, either someone's own or it prepares the offensive for another part of the formation. With that, there are three goals for the defender. First one, hold ground, repel superior enemy forces, and the most important, which is also emphasized in doctrine very often, is to inflict maximum enemy losses. Only then ground can be defended in the long term. When it comes to how the defense should be set up, the ground forces, when they did their update on the tactics, had to adopt because at that time they don't have a mass army like in the Soviet area, but the tasks were the same. And additional new threats and battlefield realities emerged on the battlefield. So they build now their defense, and this is the main thing, on two basic principles. The first principle for their defense is stability, and the second one is activeness. Everything in doctrine, when you read it, follows these aspects, either to support the stability principle or to support the activeness principle. Stability. Stability means in doctrine to resist and survive enemy direct and indirect strikes coming from UAVs, rocket artillery systems, air systems, as well as by ground units and strikes in the electromagnetic spectrum. Doctrine therefore emphasizes more decentralization by the dispersal of troops, more investment in cover and concealment, more protection by fortifications, more focus on threatened access of advance and doctrine, and it also allows open gaps and flanks. What does activeness mean? Activeness means, in Russian doctrine, to strike hard and to start early. Place the enemy under planned fire from the very first contact and create conditions for the enemy that are hard to manage. Doctrine further demands concentrate fires on pre-planned kill zones, coordinated through an integrated fire plan, prepare stay-behind reserves for situational changes. They order pre-planned counterattacks, and they also allow the use of fallback options to withdraw forces under pressure if needed. By putting now either more emphasis on the activeness or either on the stability factor, doctrine describes the two main types of defense. It's the maneuver defense and it's the positional defense. A combination of both is possible. And this is also interesting that Russian doctrine, depending on the new emerging threats on the battlefield, emphasizes clearly the value of a maneuver defense. But Russia's defense in eastern and southern Ukraine is more a positional defense. So from our point of view, three main reasons for that. First one, Russia has sufficient troops to occupy the line because positional defense needs more manpower than the maneuver defense. Second thing is maybe a political order. It's ordered with a no-step policy. And last but not least, more important, the Russian troops were not trained for the challenging maneuver warfare. This is also written in the doctrine that maneuver defense is more challenging than the positional defense. I will now go into more detail on the positional defense, because this is what we see in Ukraine. This type is designed to actively defend and hold a certain terrain. This area is either important to lose or it is vital for the own operation. Due to the need to hold ground, the stability factor principle has a very high priority. Therefore, doctrine demands obstacles, fortified position and trenches to survive enemy strikes. There is also, in combination with an air defense and electronic warfare elements that should be integrated in the defense posture. And to be robust against a Western enemy who uses the maneuverist approach, an echelon line is established which should absorb and at the end repel the enemy attack. The active part, also in this kind of defense, is important. And it's basically based on a maneuver by fire. What is meant by that? The key part is the integrated fire system, which coordinates and adjusts all sorts of fire to inflict maximum enemy losses. For this purpose, all tactical levels are integrated. You will see this next time with the example which is presented by Lieutenant Colonel Stiedl. Furthermore, different reserves have to be prepared to be active in the defense. They are used to close open gaps. They should reinforce forward units by troops or through fire lines, and they should conduct pre-planned counterattacks. All what I have said now about the positional defense Lieutenant Colonel Stiedl will now go into more detail on this and will provide an example on the division formation log.
Thank you, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to give you a closer look at the positional defense of a Russian division. The next figure will show you the basic structure of a positional defense according to Russian doctrine at the divisional level. In front of the forward edge of battle area, there's a security zone which usually has a depth of 20 to 40 kilometers. The establishment of a forward position or combat outpost depends on whether a security zone or a forward position is established. The main defense area includes 3 to 4 defensive positions at the division level. The regiments of the first echelon of the division occupy the first and second defensive position. The second echelon and the reserves of the division occupy the third and fourth position. This slide shows the order of battle of a Russian motorized rifle division. The illustration is taken from the Russian Land Forces combat regulations, which came into force in the year 2013. At this point, I would like to highlight again the first and the second defensive position, which are occupied by the regiments of the 1st Division Echelon. The 2nd Division Echelon and the division reserves occupy the 3rd and 4th position. Forward of the FIBA, 2 forward detachments are deployed in the division's security zone. In the illustration, the 1st echelon of the division consists of 3 motorized rifle regiments. The 2nd echelon consists of the tank regiment. Highlighted in color, you can see the individual regimental defensive sectors. For a better understanding, the same illustration is now shown with NATO tactical symbols. Shown are the regimental defense zones, the fire position area of the divisional artillery group, and the assembly areas of the additional elements of the division's battle order. These include the raiding detachment, you can see in the north, the air assault detachment, the anti-airborne reserve, the combined arms reserve, and the flanking detachment. In any case, an anti-tank reserve and a mobile obstacle detachment are formed. Let me explain the security zone in detail, where we have the 2 forward detachments. Several positions, defensive areas and strong points, as well as engineering obstacle system, are created in the security zone. These have the purpose of delaying the enemy attack, forcing the enemy to deploy an attack in an unfavorable direction, inflicting the greatest possible losses on the enemy, and gaining time to prepare the defense. At the divisional level, the security zone has a depth of 20 to 40 kilometers. It is usually defended by forward detachments, for example, reinforced motorized rifle or armored battalions. In exceptional cases, a regiment of the 2nd echelon of the division can defend the security zone. The defense of the security zone by the forward detachments is based on the principles of maneuver defense. The fight in the security zone is characterized by the principle of activeness. Anti-tank mines slow down the enemy attack, while UAVs, army aviation, and long-range artillery attrit the enemy. On the next slide, you can see a regimental defensive sector in detail. The size of the regiment defense sector depends on the assigned combat task, the combat effectiveness of the regiment, and the nature of terrain. At normal conditions, the regiment defense sector is 15 kilometers wide and 16 to 20 kilometers deep. As a rule, 2 positions are established and defended in the regiment defense sector. The first regiment echelon defends the first position, and the second echelon defends the second position or the combined arms reserve. Within the defense sector, defensive position, assembly areas for the reserves and mobile obstacle detachment, firing position for artillery and air defense, blocking position, and mine barriers are prepared. The battalion defense areas form the basis of each defense position. A battalion defense area is 5 kilometers wide and 3 kilometers deep. The basis of the battalion defense area is formed by company strong points, prepared for all-around defense and connected to each other by a fire and obstacle system. I now return to the order of battle at the divisional level. The first and second position form the main defense line and are characterized by the principle of stability. The enemy forces were already weakened in the security zone by mobile defense. The attacking forces are now to be repelled at the main defense line. If the enemy manages to penetrate the first and second position, the area between the first and second division echelon is used for mobile defense. The enemy forces are blocked by the anti-tank reserve, the mobile obstacle detachment, and the combined arms reserve. A counterattack by the second echelon and the flanking detachments disrupts the enemy forces. The principle of activeness, again, characterizes the conduct of battle. I would now like to make a brief comparison between the Russian regulations and the deployment of forces in Ukraine. The images show the build-up of Russian positions in the area north of Tokmak in May 2023. The analysis was carried out by the Blackberg Group and published on X, formerly Twitter. The area shown is 20 kilometers deep and approximately 15 kilometers wide, corresponding to the dimensions of a regiment defense sector. A comparison of these images with the illustration in the Russian field manual clearly shows that the defense was organized in accordance with the current regulations for positional defense. The long preparation time and the correct assessment of the main direction of the Ukrainian attack led to an above average number of anti-tank mines being laid in the security zone, a more extensive fortification of the defense positions, and a detailed preparation of the reconnaissance fire complex. The combined use of anti-tank mines, UAVs, long-range artillery fire, and attack helicopters allowed to break the momentum of the attack very early. In particular, high-value equipment, such as mine-clearing tanks, were destroyed in this phase. In the main direction of advance, a forward position, an additional forward position, was set up and fortified about 6 kilometers in front of the defense position. Between the forward position and the first defense position, firing positions for artillery and the anti-tank reserve were prepared. The distance of about 5 kilometers from the first defense position to the second matches the norm. The second echelon of the regiment occupied the second defense position. And last, the city of Tokmak was protected by an all-round defense. During the offensive, the Ukrainian forces were unable to penetrate the frontline regiment defense sector at any point. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, last slide from our side. So we can say the opponent of the Western maneuver warfare in Ukraine is Russia's style of active defense. And this system, this defensive system, is also the answer to our kind of warfare in the West, of our maneuver warfare. So if we want to restart maneuver warfare, we have to find ways First, to mitigate the existing strengths of the Russian defense, and secondly, to take advantage of their weaknesses. So we tried in our analysis, this is just parts of it, try to find out what are the strengths and weaknesses of the Russian defense. So I will go quick through it. First strength is the availability of an advanced situational awareness, and therefore the avoidance of surprise and deceptions for the forces. We have seen this especially with the security zone. The second one is the fire superiority through a multi-layered integrated fire system consisting of UCAVs, loitering ammunition, artillery, electronic warfare, air support. The third one is the established effective reconnaissance fire complex. First, to shape the enemy in his advance, and second, to fight the deep battle. The fourth one is the established elastic defense posture, which allows to absorb and to react. And the last one is the capability to shield their own forces so they can fight their defensive battle. And this is especially important for the air and electronic warfare threats. Some weaknesses or vulnerabilities. A defense is only as good as its soldiers. And we see in Ukraine, Russian soldiers have limited moral and training standards. Second one, as long as the battle is pre-planned according to the system, things tend to work. When frictions comes up, it easily gets messy in Russian defense, and counteractions do not come, or either come too late. This is because of their centralized command and control structure. And furthermore, this command and control structure depends heavily on headquarters and communication nodes. This is also a weakness. And the last one, we have stay-behind forces with their distance to the contact line, to be out of the fire range of Ukrainian fire systems. And they take cover. But when the crisis comes up in the defense, they have to move, and then they can be detected and targeted. And the same is true for the logistics. An active defense needs also an active logistics side. So this ends our briefing. And we are happy then for your questions after the next briefing. Thank you.